Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan from 𝗷𝗫𝗏𝗏, and I'm very happy to have with me today Dr. 𝗪𝗲𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂, who I'm going to have introduce herself. So, Dr. Caldwell, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm 𝗪𝗲𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂𝗂. I am a psychologist and the director of the ADHD Center, as well as the founder of Adhd.org, which is a blog and digital resource for adults with ADHD.
So I wanted to talk to Dr. Caldwell about parenting with adult ADHD because we have many parents here who have adult ADHD themselves, and I have many parents in my membership site who also have ADHD. So we're going to do a series of videos where we address some different topics in parenting with adult ADHD. So first question I wanted to ask Dr. Caldwell was, how do parents who have ADHD themselves make time for self-care and shift their mindset that they're deserving of self-care? Because I find a lot of parents, do have this mindset that maybe they don't have time for self-care or even that they're not deserving of it. So how do you help them shift that mindset?
I love this question because I think self-care, self-care kind of gets a bad rep in part because of its name. And really, particularly for folks with ADHD, when we're talking about self-care, we're talking about things like sleeping and eating well and exercising and taking time for yourself, right? All of these things fill our regulatory tank. So our regulatory tank is what fuels our ability to keep our cool and to have enough kind of in the tank for executive functioning resources for, let's say, maintaining schedules or maintaining boundaries. And so that regulatory tank is a real building block for good parenting, really. And without it, all of the knowledge in the world is kind of useless, right? Like you can know all of the right parenting strategies to employ, but if you don't have enough in the tank, if you haven't slept enough that night, if you haven't gotten some exercise, if you're hungry, right, it's not going to matter. You're going to yell, you're going to scream, you're going to, capitulate, you're going to do whatever it is that your default is, because there's not enough in the tank. So I really see those behaviors, those regulatory filling behaviors, as fundamental, as kind of like the first step to good parenting, and particularly parenting kids with ADHD, right? Because nothing is more taxing of that regulatory system than a child with ADHD who needs us to kind of insert some boundaries and insert some structure and be that regulatory factor for them. So if we're going to have that, then we need it in our tank. And the way we do that is we eat well, we sleep, we exercise, we meditate, we take our medication, we get our own connection, right? Those are kind of the 6 factors that research shows that gives us more regulatory capacity. And so when we kind of shift that mindset of this is a fundamental building block, then it's not something about deserving. It's about, I need to do this in order to show up in the way that I want to show up for my kids. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make time for it, right? I'm going to need to create time for it, and I'm going to need to do the things that create that time. I can't just kind of stumble into it. And so I need to get the childcare. I need to line up when this is going to happen. I need to kind of think it through ahead of time because it's not going to just occur to me.
So, Dr. Caldwell, something I want to ask you about pertaining to what you said is that on a lot of parenting social media currently, I see a lot of parenting social media influencers, basically talk about, you have to be attentive to your kids at every single moment. And, your kids are connection seeking and attachment and all this. And, if you're not, giving them attention every single second that they want it, then, you're not connecting with them. And I think this is a really confusing message for all parents, but I also think it can evoke a lot of guilt in parents with ADHD who, number one, might not have the bandwidth, for that, but 2, need to take care of themselves first, like you said. So what would you say to those parents who feel, pulled really because they want to do the self-care piece like we're talking about, but then also feel like, well, I feel like I have to believe this person who's telling me that I have to be, attentive to my kids at every minute?
I think I think there's so many competing demands on parents right now, and that if we were to do all of the things that we're told we have to do, we would need 552 hours in a day, right? It's just not possible. And yes, our kids seek out connection, but guess what? They can seek out connection from other people too. And so they don't need 100% connection, and there's no research that supports that they need 100% connection from their primary caregiver, right? That they need connection. They also need to develop an ability to be alone. They need to develop an ability to entertain themselves, and develop their own imagination. And so having some balance there is really important for them, in addition to being important for kids. So I think that both things can be met. I think that attachment is good and real and necessary, but it doesn't need to be 24/7. That, when we are able to attach and connect with our children, we're most able to do that when we are well resourced ourselves. That if we're depleted, particularly if we have ADHD, if our own tank is depleted, then we're not able to connect with people very well, right? Because, and we all know this, the ADHD brain will wander off, right? We're not going to kind of stay in connection. And so we need to kind of build up that regulatory capacity, which allows us to connect and can kind of make that good connection time. And then that can be a smaller amount of time, right? Because we're really connected with our kids. And that other time, our kids can be working on developing those other skills, on, connecting with other people other than us, and being alone and developing their imagination and doing all the other things that they need to be doing.
So quality over quantity.
Exactly. Yeah. Quality over quantity, and diversity, right? Like,
yes.
That it's not just me. I'm not the only important person in my kid's life. Right? They have a dad, they have grandparents, they have friends, they have other caregivers, right? And having that whole array is really, really useful in terms of learning how to interact with people, and how to kind of shift and sway and manage different relationships as well.
And can I tell you, to your point, often the kids who I see struggle the most with self-regulation and behavior at home are the ones who haven't learned to spend time by themselves and entertain themselves. And without question, the most significant and severe sibling conflicts I see at home are the kids who have not learned to spend time by themselves and entertain themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're probably co-regulating, right? They're probably using their parent to regulate them, and that's great, and that's useful, and that's an important building block. But we also need to learn how to regulate on our own, and not everybody in the world is going to co-regulate with us, right? And so we need to be able to figure out how to do that for ourselves, and kids can do that best when they have experiences outside of just that primary relationship.
This was so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. Where can we find you on social media?
So I'm on Adhd.org, on Instagram and Facebook, and you can find me at www.adhd.org as well.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.